Okay. And go live. All right, we're live on YouTube.
Okay.
Do you want me to
Waiting.
try and play the theme song like last time, or did that?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm gonna
didn't
try
even
and
get
live
my
mix it.
hair
Let's see.
There we go.
Ready? Here we go. Going live?
This thing.
Maybe.
Okay, this thing's on. Yeah. All right. Welcome to the Padres Hot Tub, everybody. I'm Craig Elston, joined by Chris Reed, Rafi Cantor, and you live on YouTube, or for our patrons joining us live on Riverside as well. Holy cow. It's September 15th. It's 12:30 in the afternoon Pacific time as we are live on YouTube, and we've got ourselves a little bit of something to talk about. The big windup for Kevin Acee, and whammo, he brought it this morning in the San Diego Union Tribune, the culture piece that I think a lot of people have been waiting for in some way or another. It's here. It's arrived. We have a lot to talk about.
Christopher?
We're not going to talk about the series win over the Los Angeles Dodgers. That's not where we start. Coming into Dodgers Stadium into Chavez Ravine. Yes. This team's finally turned the corner, guys.
Yeah.
Just in time to get to home. Look, turn the corner. Oh, look, there it is.
Oh, well, there's our driveway and our luggage with our suitcases packed for where we actually live.
It feels a little bit like that age-old question. Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? Like, it's just like I think there's like other things we need to talk about besides the series win. It was a pleasant cherry on top of the shit sundae.
It certainly was. And the Padres will play the A's now. God, as I was going to pick up my kid, James, from school. Hey, let me tell you, you won one in a row there. Now you go to the A's and you sweep them. Why don't you go sweep them? Then my boy Buddy Black's Rockies will be in town. And boy, it sure is a shame what's happening to Buddy Black's win-loss record. It's just getting torched by them Rockies. Then you could beat them and you'd have won yourself 7 in a row. And wouldn't that be great? Like, actually, no, it wouldn't be great at all. It would be awful. Probably drop us like 3 draft positions along the way. And for what? For someone to point to at the end in the offseason or at the start of next season? Well, did you see when they got it turned around and they won 8 in a row? Like, what are you talking about?
Coach likes being gaslit. It's a psychological problem.
Let me tell you, those monsters in my basement, they got nothing on my friend.
All right, let's get into this. We've pulled some pull quotes. This dropped this morning in the San Diego Union Tribune. Print people got it on their driveway, pre-dawn when they woke up. But this is the story that Kevin Acee has been hinting in multiple interviews for literally 2 months that he's been working on a bigger story about what's going on behind the scenes. And like I said, we've got some pull quotes that we can put up on the screen for you as we go through this. To some extent, I want to go through the major discussion points in the article. I don't want to say allegations, but first I want to talk about style.
They're sourced.
Because,
that's not quite allegations. Like, it's sourced.
yeah. And that's something that I've already seen a little bit of discussion in our Discord and elsewhere, which was like, oh, well, this is a Kevin Acee opinion piece. Kevin Acee doesn't like Manny Machado, and this was his, big swing at Manny Machado. But what I would describe this as is modern Washington Post, New York Times style reporting, which is you give sources anonymity in exchange for their honesty. and you get a large number of sources so that you have a lot of corroboration across the anonymity so that you can make a firm statement without it being based on potentially incomplete or biased information. So, I'm trying to find the exact spot where he talked about his sourcing, but I believe he said it was a dozen people in uniform, including, yeah, here it is. More than 30 conversations with more than a dozen uniformed personnel, including 8 players and other members of the organization. So, that sourcing is put in there close to the top for a reason. It's to say that this is a lot of people talking. This isn't Kevin Acee talking, and it's people in the clubhouse and it's people around the team as well.
I was really surprised by the immediate reaction by some people in our Discord and on Twitter that were pretty dismissive of this, I think, because of what the past between Kevin Acee and Manny Machado. Kevin Acee and Manny Machado clearly do not get along. There is no love lost between the two of them. But when I saw those 2 paragraphs that you're talking about, Craig, of just the scope of this and like how much that this is being sourced and what's being worked on, I was surprised, and I think you were right to tag it as like modern Washington Post, New York Times articles, because it really struck me as something that you would see from like written about like the cabinet of a presidential administration. You know what I mean?
Right.
Where it's like, we need to know what's going on inside the Oval Office, but the president won't answer our questions directly, so we have to then go to all of the cabinet ministers, et cetera, to get a fuller picture of what it's like, a Maggie Haberman-esque sort of piece.
I'm
So,
thrilled that
yeah.
Kevin Acee is trying to be that person to Manny Machado. He's trying to be the Bob Woodward to Manny's Nixon. Oh no, I just lost my point. Oh no, my brain just farted, boys.
Well, that's okay.
Let's
It'll
see
come
some
back.
article and I'll find it.
Yeah. Let's start, Rafe, with AC0. We'll just kind of go through the story, not each paragraph, but go through the major parts of the story and the major discussions. So I'm not sure how this shows. Is this going to show up in our Riverside? Am I going to see it too, Rafe, or should I just proceed as if someone else is seeing it?
I'm sorry, do you want me to put the quotes on screen?
Yes, please.
Oh, yeah, let me see if I can do that. Hang on. Just hang with me for a sec, folks.
You got it.
This is
So I labeled what I sent you 0 through 7.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
If you could start with 0, that'd be perfect.
I am
just like this season.
How's that?
All right. Yes, absolutely. Okay, here we go. So from the top of Acee's story, according to virtually everyone queried in a series of more than 30 conversations, there is unanimous consensus that Machado controls the clubhouse and sets a tone and personality for the team. This assessment is based on how he is treated, the latitude he's given, and how messages for the team are passed through him from above. It's also based on what multiple players said were his own declarations, though Machado denied that to be the case. Machado says, quote, I think everybody is a leader. I think we have 26 leaders. I think blah, blah, blah. Baseball is a team sport. So the first major allegation, I think, of this article is that the Padres culture, it's not a toxic culture. It's a disengaged culture. It's a culture of show up, clock in, do your thing, leave. That's that. And there isn't that hold each other accountable, raise the boat. How do we all improve? How do we all get together on this? And as it relates to Manny, Chris, I think what's being mostly said, and we'll get more screenshots here momentarily, is that Manny is kind of a dominating force in the clubhouse, a force of nature, somebody that is difficult to confront, someone that's difficult to hold to account. And I think very importantly, someone who, when he tries to hold himself and his teammates to account, he doesn't follow through.
I'd say that's accurate. We'll see the other screenshots, where Acee kind of lays out his case for that. What I draw from this, Craig, is that there's nobody above Manny being the big boy in the room. the adult. Like, there are athletes that have this attitude, this posture, this arrogance throughout sports. I mean, everywhere. And they've all been champions, and they've all not been accused. They haven't faced accusations of fostering a, a bad culture because they've won, because their greatness has eclipsed that. Now, Manny's coming off of a terrible season where he hasn't lifted the team. His style of leadership, quote unquote, has been a failure, a complete one. And I'm just struck by that there's nobody above Manny. Is this the San Diego Manny Machados? I don't think it is. And that points to me to the front office. And that's where the responsibility lies of not setting the cultural tone.
Sure. Let's go to the second poll. Let's go to AC2, because this is really the crux of the story, that Kevin Acee did all this reporting, and then he did what a reporter's supposed to do: go to the primary source and confront him with it and give him the opportunity to respond. And they had a 30-minute conversation Wednesday prior to the Padres-Dodgers game in Los Angeles. And we'll see several of these quotes going forward. I think a couple of them, Manny makes some really good points. I think a couple of them,
Are bad.
Manny, it really doesn't look good. And this first quote was put high, I think, for a reason, because this is the single most disengaged, disconnected comment that Manny Machado was quoted at. What is this, college baseball? What is this, high school? No, it's actually way more important than that. This is where you get paid $35 million to do your job and to be the leader of a team. And to dismiss the very concept is precisely, Rafe, why Kevin Acee starts the story with the anecdote of an August day game at Petco Park, a series finale against LA, a voluntary pregame infield drill that no one shows up to except for like Matt Batten and probably Matt Carpenter. And then it's the Dodgers' turn, and the first two guys out of the dugout are Mookie and Freddie. Yeah. And and then every Dodger follows, and that every Dodger is locked in. I think this is the primary thing we see in the NL West, is we see the Giants. They don't have a star. They don't have a system that's creating wins for them the way they want, but they're locked in. The Dodgers do have stars. They have a system that's creating what they want, and they're locked in.
I was generally dismissive of the idea when the Padres handed out, decades-long, hundreds of $1 million contracts. There were some people that were like, oh, these guys, they're not going to want to like show up and like do their job, and like, they cash their checks and they're too comfy and blah, 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 blah. And I think that sentiment is generally BS, because that implies that these guys don't care about winning championships and don't care about winning, and et cetera. And I think they do. I think there's a reason why they got to this stage and they haven't done it, and they want to do it. But at the same time, I think if you are going to give those contracts to people and make a 10-year bet on someone as the future, you have to be damn sure that they're committed to building the culture that you need the other guys on the team to have instilled in them. And, I thought that the Mookie and Freddie comparison was super interesting, because like Mookie Betts has the same kind of contract that Manny Machado does.
Yes, he does.
He has that huge extension that's $300 million plus from the Dodgers. And that organization bet on him, bet on Mookie. And it's, not only from an on-field, standpoint, but pretty much universally, anyone you talk to, people have this incredibly high regard for Mookie Betts. And I think people have a high regard for Manny Machado as a player. But I am reminded of someone else in our Discord said this, remember when Will Myers was the culture contract? He was going to be the one who was going to come in and be the guy and be the leader. And, we're making this commitment to him for 6 years or 7 years or whatever it was. And he just like wasn't personally suited to be that person. And then it became Hosmer. And Hosmer was the leadership guy, and he was on field like dog shit, but like people at least around the clubhouse really did seem to look up to him in some way. Whatever you want to say to that, I genuinely think that that's BS, but whatever. Now Manny's the leadership guy. And the question now that's kind of hanging over us with this article is does Manny have that within him? Does Manny have the leadership thing within him? And this article's certainly bringing that to the forefront.
Okay,
Let's go to
this
the next
quote.
slide.
Well, no, I'd like to chime in
Yeah.
on this. I'd like
Sure,
to
sure, sorry.
put my that quote sucks. It's arrogant, dismissive, and defensive. I think, right? This is college baseball, and what is this high school? But I also see his point. Let's talk about winning cultures. Let's talk about teams that have winning cultures. Let's talk about the New England Patriots, the Patriot Way. What happened to the Patriot Way when Tom Brady stopped performing for them? The winning stopped. If the Golden State Warriors didn't have Stephen Curry shooting like he shoots, if that stopped for a year, would they have the same result? No.
Right.
They'd have the exact same culture, but they wouldn't win. So I see Manny's point. Manny thinks that if every single guy, he thinks that culture is built from within, right? He thinks that it's an individual thing. It might even be part of his ideology at this point, guys. Like, we know Manny has worn t-shirts of a certain political spent. Maybe he's going Ayn Rand on us. Like, maybe that's what this is. Well, let's see. Yeah, I'm ready for the next slide.
Oh, all right. Let's see the next slide. This really hurts. This is a tough slide for Manny Machado. The Padres had what some estimated were 8 or 9 team meetings, some players only, others involving members of the uniform staff or the front office. In all of them, it felt like agreement had been reached and plans laid out to get the team on a path of cohesion. According to multiple sources, Machado was among the primary speakers in virtually all of them. And then over the ensuing days, he was among those who didn't follow through on action plans. Quote, "I follow through on everything I say," he said, end quote. It was relayed to him that the types of things that could have been disregarded included being on time to meetings and buses, pregame work, executing unselfish at-bats, or demonstrating a sense of engagement on the base paths or elsewhere. Machado, according to multiple players, was by no means the only one who often did not put what was said into practice. The failure to turn words into winning play was endemic. What some did maintain was that because Machado is such a significant voice, his not following through on the little things set a tone that essentially could not be overcome. Now, this is where I'm going to be a little bit old school, but I'm going to give you an anecdote that's not that old, okay? And it's from my personal life. As you know, some of you watching have no idea, but I spent 3 years as the voice of the San Diego Gulls, American Hockey League, which means the direct affiliate of the Anaheim Ducks. And the head coach of the San Diego Gulls was Dallas Eakins, who went on to be the head coach of the Ducks for the past, I think, 4 or 5 seasons before he was let go last year. And I came from the Sockers to the Gulls. And the Sockers, if there was a 12:30 bus to leave the offices, then if it left at 12:40, that was pretty good for the Sockers. You know, like there might be 3 guys who are late or somebody that we have to pick up along the way or whatever. And so there was kind of that feeling of like, oh, well, dibba-dibba-doo, right? And I was always this kid. All right. I was the kid that was always 2 minutes late to the first period. I was always the kid scrambling to get on the bus. I've had a history of always being like just a little bit late. And there was a time that I was like 1 minute late for the bus, like an 8 o'clock bus. And I got on at 8:01. And I never did that again. I never did that again because it was instilled in me that day in a series of multiple conversations, just how wrong that was. And that as a member so-called of the staff, I needed to be in my seat 15 minutes before the bus was supposed to leave. That 8 o'clock is late. You're late at 8. You're on time at about 7:40. And really, if you want to say you're early, show up at 7. And that starts with the head coach sitting in his seat when everybody is coming on. And that starts with the key players on the team being the first guys on the bus. And that all of them are on the bus with 5 minutes to go. That's creating a culture of accountability. It's a very small thing. It's a very simple thing. But let me tell you, it is throughout professional sports. And it's throughout a lot of professional regimes where if there's a bus at 8, the wheels turn at 8:00. So get on the gosh darn bus. When your $35 million superstar is late to the bus, like when your $35 million superstar who's leading team meetings is late to the next team meeting, that really, really says something. And if it happens more than once, I mean, sure, your tire could have blown out, right? You could have got caught in a horrible accident, whatever. But like if that happens more than once, that is a direct cultural indictment. This was one part of this story that I actually reacted to the most.
Who relayed it to you, Craig? Who made it clear to you that you needed to be in your seat 20 minutes before?
The head coach, the assistant
Yeah, because
coaches,
it's his job.
the clubhouse
It's the
manager.
head coach's job. That's whose job it is. It wasn't the star player coming up to you. Like, he might have given you a look, right? Like, that's what this speaks to me. Like, I know Kevin AC wants to like this. He wants to be Walter Winchell, like playing with the stars of modern radio. But this speaks. I think this piece is huge. I think it's very important. I think it's needed. I think Manny Machado needs to be held accountable. I follow through on everything I say is bullshit. We know this. Kevin AC wouldn't have Jake Cronenworth or whoever is the source primarily pointing to Manny being a bad habit leader if there wasn't a problem, right? But this speaks to a lack of leadership within the organization at the tippy top of the pyramid. Manny Machado is not the tippy top of the pyramid. Oh, Craig, you're muted,
Craig,
my amigo.
You're muted.
I'm sorry, I did that because I had to blow my nose. But Rafe, I think what we see through this article, and I think another one of these pull quotes gets to it, is that there is a culture of fear in the Padres clubhouse to confront Manny Machado. There's a spot in this where it says that when AC asks that question, people look at him like he has 6 heads.
Yeah.
And that's, I get it. When you're that big, I mean, does Bob Melvin grab Manny Machado by the scruff of the neck? You get onto the bus on time. Like, he's too big to fail. He's got a $350 million contract that's going to run through 11 seasons. And Bob Melvin has a contract for 1 season. Like,
Exactly.
It's a very difficult circumstance for me to pin this on Bob Melvin. Okay, now here's something, though, that I think this is where Manny turns it around a little bit in this story, or at least makes his case. He says, quote, "Last year, we made it to the championship series. We have the same group of guys. We have the same clubhouse. I mean, a couple guys here and there are mixed in, but the majority of the guys, the same. None of these conversations came up last year when we were winning, but when you're losing and there's expectations and you don't perform at the highest level, this is what happens." Absolutely. This is what happens. Every team that was expected to win that doesn't win gets September think pieces written about them. We're waiting for Dennis Lynn's. This was AC's. This is where, reporters spend months figuring out the things that they want to say at the end of the season. But where AC continues is he says some of these things actually were bubbling below the surface last summer. And I'd like to note that in every full season that Manny Machado has played for the San Diego Padres, there has been an extended period of drift within the season. 2019, it was the end of the season. The second half of the season was a complete mess, and Machado admitted he checked out. 2020 doesn't count. It's a not real season and it doesn't count. 2021, before the collapse, the team spent 2.5 months playing like 2 games under 500 ball against bad ball clubs, one bad team after another. And they did just what we saw this year. They'd split of the games. They'd mess around. 2022, the team drifted from June to late August. And it wasn't until the very last month of the season that they kicked it into gear. And then they had a great 2-week run in the playoffs. And this year, they've drifted ever since the Kershaw meet. Like, since that game, show me the period of time where the Padres put it together. You can't, because they've never won more than 3 games in a row.
Do you like to had they put it together prior to that? Like, really? Like, I think the whole season's been adrift. Like, because Manny sucked.
Yeah, it has. I mean, that day they had a winning record and they beat the Dodgers, right?
Yeah.
I remember seeing the graph, right? Our
playoff
percentages were at like 90 or whatever. And now they're at 0.
They literally, like, that day is like when it's been a long and continuous gradual decline until it's gotten to 0. I do want to point out that our 2 best months so far by winning percentage, July and now the current month we're in, September, happen to be the 2 months where Manny Machado's had his best month at the plate. So, and it comes to that paradox of, like, you're paying Manny Machado to do a job, and sometimes that job isn't done as well as it's done other times. And can you be mad at him for just simply like, hey, I tried and it just didn't go as well this time as it went before, which is kind of the point that he makes throughout the article, is like, hey, we just didn't perform. Like, that's what happens sometimes. Sometimes you play games and you don't win, and that's a matter of fact. But at the same time, the team is living in performance, and that's the way that the team has been constructed. So it comes down to, again, this is what happens when collapses happen. It's like, where do you shoulder the blame, and like, where do you lay things at their feet? Because, like, you could put the blame just as much on AJ Preller for constructing a roster that literally lives and dies by whether or not Manny Machado is in a slump or not, as much as you could put it on Manny. You know what I mean? So I mean, we should probably keep going so we can get to some
absolutely. Let's
it's so hard to like order this out, because like I have a broader, like, there's broader things at play here, but the article is amazing.
Here's where Manny is at his most reflective. He's confronted with the discussion of when I think it was Wilson hit Teoscar Hernandez with a pitch on 0-2 after a home run, comparing it to when Manny got clearly purposefully drilled in by the Pittsburgh dude, and no one reacted. In the dugout. Maybe like a couple guys turned their heads and then went back to their iPads.
No, we talked about this. This was a canary dead in a cage at the bottom of the coal mine.
Yeah.
Right. The first 2 paragraphs of the pull quote that we've posted on the screen, you can see is just reflecting what I just said. Then Manny's reaction. Quote, I think there is, saying, a sense of unity. I think there is. Can there be more? Can there be a lot more? Yeah. I wouldn't say that there isn't any, that we were not together. So I think it's unfair for people to assume that, or to think that. Everyone has different relationships. But can there be improvement? Yeah, there's always room for improvement. Over the course of the sit down in the visitors' dugout, there was never a point where Machado appeared more reflective than when considering the togetherness topic. After one particularly long pause, he said this, quote, I think we just didn't want it. I think overall as a group, we didn't want it as bad as Seattle did, or as bad as some of these other teams. I will say that. I think that's everyone's fault. It's everybody's fault. We didn't want it as a team. It falls down to the team. That's not necessarily one player. It's not an individual sport. So I think ultimately it comes down to all of us. We should have wanted it more. Wow.
I literally almost like dropped my phone when I read this, because I was like, it's one of those things where it's like, it's the quiet part out loud, where it's like, we all know it, but then to hear someone actually say it, let alone like Manny Machado, clubhouse leader, et cetera, I was blown away. And then honestly, this was the quote that made me the most upset, because guys, what have we been doing for 6 months? What have we been doing? Like, we've been like living and dying by this team, like watching every game, like really like committing and investing our lives and money and time to this team, and they just didn't want it.
I want
Go
to.
ahead,
I
Chris.
want to debate the they, Rafi. This
Yeah.
Yeah.
this was the most upsetting for me too. But like I talked about earlier, I think Manny, to a point of ideology, believes in the individual, and this I think is an excuse. You guys know I love Manny. Ha-Sung Kim is now my favorite Padre officially. It happened before this piece, but Ha-Sung Kim, favorite Padre. Manny, you have been demoted. This is the most upsetting piece because if you just replace we with I, which is what Manny really means here, he
Yeah.
says it's not an individual sport. Baseball's the most individual sport. And that's widely known. Like the clubhouse should gel, but winning does that. If you replace every we with I and it's everybody's fault, and imagine that Manny's saying we as the excuse, but he knows the truth. That's the most upsetting paragraph in the piece for me.
Yes. And I couldn't agree more. It's projection. He's saying
Yes.
us, and he means me. And here's how it closes. For Machado, that's all noise. Quote, honestly, the moral to the story is simple, he said. I think we're getting a little sidetracked here. I think ultimately there are a lot of guys that lead here. Obviously myself, Toddy, Bogey, Darvish, Crony, Joe. We're all obviously going to be here a long time. And people look up to us and they expect us to go out there every single day and be better. I think we didn't this year. That falls on us. That falls on me for not performing how I'm supposed to perform and the capabilities I'm supposed to be performing at. And when these things happen, this is the outcome. And these conversations start happening. Oh, well, there's no chemistry. There's no leadership, or there's no this, or there's no that. The clubhouse is getting lost. The manager's lost the clubhouse. The front office this. There's always going to be stuff. And ultimately, it comes down to one thing. We didn't perform. I didn't perform what I'm capable of performing. We didn't perform because that's just what it is. And you've got to take full responsibility for that. At the end of the day, it's whatever you do in between the lines when you put on that jersey and you go out there and you leave it on the field. So that's the story. I don't think there's anything else that can be talked about. And Kevin finishes with, and within that dissonance, it seems, lies the disconnect. It was a beautifully written final line. I actually thought this was, for Kevin, one of the best he's done.
Absolutely.
I think it's an excellent piece. So here are my 5 primary takeaways. 1, the Padres are disengaged as a club. They aren't all rowing the same direction. They are a disengaged group. They're a group of individuals that shows up and plays individually. And this comports with everything we've seen on the field all year long. So that I will take 100%. Takeaway number 2, Manny is a force of nature in the clubhouse. He is a force of nature. He's an ego force of nature that is very, very difficult to confront. He is not the type of open, welcoming person that is opening his heart, to others in the clubhouse. He is the guy that says, I'm going to do it in between the lines and F you the rest of the time. And it's difficult for people who want to confront Manny because he's Manny fucking Machado. That also tracks perfectly. Manny doesn't live up to his words with deeds. This is new reporting from Kevin Acee. This is brand new reporting, late to meetings, late to the bus, not, you could talk about his at-bats here or there. I think that's harder to do. He's not leading by example. Manny doesn't lead by example. That's kind of a reflection of the third takeaway. But his example is one not to follow, as opposed to one that a good young player should emulate. And the last is maybe the most damning. Manny can't see the forest for the trees. He doesn't see or recognize the situation as being one that is a problem. He sees it as everything is fine. We just have to hit better next year, and we'll be fine because when we hit better, we'll win more. That's a very difficult thing to overcome, to be honest. And it really does kind of lead you to a post-mortem of this season that becomes a pre-mortem, that this season was lost the last week of February, first week of March, when Manny Machado showed up to the Padres clubhouse, and the first thing he did was make it about his contract and the fact that he was going to opt out at the end of the year. And then the Padres, hey, they caved. They caved to that. The bluff worked perfectly. And they gave him all the power in the universe. He has more power than almost any player in Major League Baseball. He has more security than almost any player in Major League Baseball. And it didn't work. I truly think, guys, the Padres were afraid. I think the Padres were afraid that this force of nature that cannot be confronted was going to tank their season in 2023 by making it all about himself and his contract. And in doing so, they failed to recognize that actually the tanking would come by giving him what he wanted and giving him the contract that would create an environment in which he could no longer be ever confronted again. And it leads to a year like this.
Yeah. We have Friar Goose who wants to come up in a second, so I'll bring him up. But the one thing I just wanted to say really quickly is I remember when we were defending Manny Machado against the Johnny Hustle allegations. I remember when we were, remember last year when like Machado would there was the whole like Kim Chado thing, and like he'd put his arm around Ha-Sung Kim and he would say, "I love you" in Korean to this whole thing. And it's this idea, like I think we really saw the promise of Manny as a leader, but that's when things are good. When things are bad, you see what someone's really made of. You know what I mean? And I think that what we saw in this article, it's been what we've seen this entire season is things are bad. And there's some real questions that are being asked about what people are truly made of when things are bad. So I'm going to bring up Friar Goose right now. I assume he's still got the same kick-ass internet video quality. There it is. Hell yeah. He's back, baby.
Of course. All right, guys. Hey, thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it. And great points already. Really good points. I want to. So I'm gonna play devil's advocate a little bit. I want your guys' take on this. So, the Manny, the impression I've always gotten from Manny, very talented player, right? Kind of does things his own way. And he does it. There's a lot of check marks he doesn't check, like the Johnny Hustle. That tells me that, you know what, I'm not going to do the way you want, right? Because I'm Manny effing Machado, right? This is the way I play the game. This is the way I do things. One thing I will say about Manny is ever since he came to San Diego, there was all these accusations. People hated him. He came with a lot of baggage, and he's become a different person. He's performed differently, and he's learned. I feel that he learned. I think the contract helped teach him in a way, right? To put on a better face, be more of a leader, and behave differently, right? But what the impression I've never gotten from him is that he enjoys or that he takes on that leadership role. He's the guy. He's the guy, and this is his team, and he's that, yes, because he's the highest paid player. Yes, because he's the biggest, probably biggest free agent signing the team had for a long time, right? He was the guy in that sense. But I never got the impression that he is the everyone get around here. I'm gonna teach you how it's gonna be. David Ortiz style, Nelly Cruz, if you want. I've never gotten that impression from Manny, right? So, I think it's a little bit, I read this article and it's basically AC, kind of just tearing down Manny, why he's not that guy, right? And that he probably needs to be that guy. My question to you guys is, what if Manny's just not that guy? What if he's a really talented baseball player that gets injured once every 9 years, right? It's going to be there every day. And most years is going to put up really good numbers. And that's all you're ever going to get from Manny. That's all he's ever going to be. He's not going to be that clubhouse leader, right? What then? What then? And then another point that Rafi pointed out, the only good months the Padres had this year was when Manny was raking. That's great. That was also true last year when he carried this team on his back all year, right? For most of the year. It was, he led this team and he carried him. How is that possible with Juan Soto, Fernando Tatis, and Xander Bogaerts on this team, right?
Yeah.
How is that possible that we live and die on the bat of Manny Machado? Doesn't make any sense. So those two questions, guys. What if Manny is just Manny, and this has not changed since day one, right? What if that's just who he is, number one? And number two, how can we be in this situation that we live and die on the bat of Manny Machado? That's my question, guys. I'm out. Thanks.
Friar Goose, great stuff, man. As always, it is so great to have you on the show, and we appreciate you, brother. Have a great weekend. All right. Yeah, let's talk through it. And I think Manny is who Manny is, right? It kind of leads me right back to Preller. And it leads me back to another thing that you brought up earlier, Rafe. The leadership contract in 2016. Like, if I was just going to come to you in a vacuum and say, here's an executive who tried to find a clubhouse leader for his club and he picked Will Myers, like, after you stopped laughing, you would probably ask a question about that guy's judgment, about his ability to discern what a leader is. And so far, it appears that the guys he's picked has been Will Myers, Eric Hosmer, and Manny Machado, and now Xander
Yeah.
Bogaerts.
Yeah. I mean, we can only go with what we heard from Boston about Xander. And what we heard is that Xander is a culture guy, that he was a leadership guy and et cetera. But it sounds like he didn't really have the oxygen maybe necessarily to bring that in this season. I will say that it was Peter Seidler who pushed the Manny, the extension. And questions are still from 5 years ago about the Hosmer deal, whether or not that was AJ's guy or whether or not that was Ron Fowler's guy. And with the Will Meyer contract, I think you can probably pretty squarely lay at AJ's feet. But we have Chiloa here in a second who wants to come up and talk about this, so I'm going to bring him up. But it does beg the question of, like, who is making the decisions of giving the statute contracts out? Is it Peter Seidler or is it AJ Preller? Because if it's AJ Preller, there's a remedy to that. If it's Peter Seidler and AJ's just doing Peter's bidding, then that becomes interesting. Let's see if Chiloa is connecting here. And hey, man, can you hear us?
Yeah, what's going on, guys? Can you hear me?
Great to have you on.
Yeah,
It's nice. I love the new setup. This piece is obviously going to be everything that anyone talks about. But I feel like the front office is getting off light, and I like that you guys were getting to it. At this last point, Craig, we were at Bottle Rocket, I think, that first meetup when the Cronenworth extension happened, and we like was that an AJ thing or was that a Peter thing? And I think that's the question that now needs to be asked out of all these extensions. Is AJ fighting? I mean, I don't want to stand for AJ. Like, that's not what I want to do in life. But I think that I think it's an open question. Was AJ ready to let Manny opt out, bring in X as kind of insurance, and then see where the chips laid after the season? I don't know. I mean, I'm starting to buy that. And so I just wanted to get, I guess, more thoughts from you guys on what you guys think the role of the front office is in all this.
Chiloa, great question. Yesterday I was listening. Pardon me. Yesterday I was listening to Tony Gwynn Jr. talking to his producer Matt Scraby. I think Elo's on vacation on 97.3, and Tony was really defending AJ Preller and was trying to pin Scraby on specifics. Like, okay, you want to get rid of AJ Preller. Why? What's the thing he did wrong? What is it? Is it and Scraby's like, the bench. The bench wasn't good enough. Okay, the bench. And it's like it's really easy to get to a spot where you defend AJ Preller pretty strongly. We have an open question now. Do we have a management problem or do we have an ownership problem? And a year ago, it would have been ridiculous to even suggest that the Padres have any type of ownership problem. We thought we had the best owner in all of pro sports. But if he is dabbling to the point that he's the one that's making extensions that are extremely ill-advised, well, now we're getting into that Artie Moreno territory, which is what the one thing we don't want Peter Seidler to be, is Artie Moreno 2.0. Because if that's the case, we're going to have really mediocre baseball throughout Fernando Tatis's career, and we don't want that. So that's an unanswerable question for right now. But I think it's missing the point to just nail AJ Preller for 2023 roster decisions. Was this roster not put together perfectly well? It wasn't, and was the depth an issue? It was. It's the big choices that need to be hung over AJ Preller's head, not the little ones. It's the Machado extension and the Bogaerts contract and the Cronenworth extension. These are what are going to hurt us for years and years and years to come. So the only way he's not hurt by that is literally if he was the one that said we shouldn't do it and Seidler said we should, in which case, what can you do? There's nothing you can do about it. There's literally nothing you can do, but that needs to be found out. And if Seidler's upset, he needs to be upset enough to take action on it, because it's the big things that he's made mistakes on the biggest things.
Yeah, I think one other thing that I took away, and I couldn't agree more, Craig, but from the article was they're using Manny as the mouthpiece of the front office in the clubhouse. And I thought that was interesting from a, you're basically neutering Bob Melvin at this point, and what's his role on the team? I've heard some people say, well, why isn't he cracking down? Why isn't he setting the culture? But if you've basically just, everybody in that place knows it's dead man walking, and it's Manny's team. And maybe even after this, Manny's guy is going to get installed, right? Maybe we're going to see Flaherty as the manager of this team. I don't know. I mean, I don't know where that leaves Melvin. I mean, I don't think he's completely without blame in this thing, but it I don't know. It's a mess.
You're muted again, Craig.
Craig, you're muted.
Stop sneezing.
I know. By the way, I tested negative. Okay, I tested yesterday. I tested today.
I was worried.
I'm not worried. I'm not going to get it from you.
Yeah.
I thought, just in case, for everyone who comes on, if they're afraid of a potential spread, and not for nothing, why are we not afraid of the spread of just a common cold? Like, I don't want to get sick. But Chiloa, good stuff, man. Thanks for coming on, keeping the conversation going. Appreciate you.
Thanks, guys.
Chiloa, you allowed me to remember my brain fart, and it's perfect because it fits right in with what we're going. This piece should not be the only thing people talk about, because it aims for the lowest person on the tree. It aims for the only person AC can attack. He can't write a piece about maybe Seidler agreed to a bonehead deal and is Artie Moreno investing in the players and then being cheap behind the scenes. He can't write that because he's the team beat reporter. He's not going to write AJ Preller attack pieces because they've been written. He's going to put the blame on the guy he doesn't like and on the guy that every fan can go, oh, he's making $35 million, so we want more from him, when he's always been the exact same thing. He's never been rah Mike Trout. Luis Robert said 4 weeks ago, I'm not a leader, and he got a bunch of crap for it. But maybe when these guys are honest about that with themselves and with the team, it leads to a better result. And maybe that's what Manny Machado should come to realize. Oh, hey, maybe I shouldn't be the culture. And maybe I should give guys like Xander oxygen in that. Maybe this piece helps him does it that way. But Craig, man, saying that Manny Machado asking for an extension torpedoed this season, I think that's a very, very bold distillation of the problems this team faced. I think he is ultimately one guy, and we've seen underperformance up and down throughout the roster. Now, maybe was Manny's tactics detrimental to his performance on the field? Maybe he spent a little too much time worried about being a soccer owner. Maybe he worried too much about the contract, and that's why his season sucked. He's now had 2 shitty years whenever he signed a contract. Let's hope that the pattern that he has already forged for himself gets made anew, and the team makes hires in its front office to build a winning culture from the people whose job it actually is.
I like it. By the way, just want to say big thanks to Lingu90 for dropping a tip in.
What?
Thank you, Lynn.
We got you.
Oh, it's Lynn Wynn. I know who it is. It's Lynn. Thank you, Lynn. Appreciate you. I you see the names, the handle.
I get so confused with kids and their handles these days. What is this handle here? What is your name?
No, thank you, Lynn. Appreciate that. Also, huge patrons always jump to the front. Let's welcome in Tevin McReynolds. Oh, Tevin.
T-Mac. He's listed as T-Mac. Hey, there he is.
For sure this was going to be a black figure. Hello, this is Tevin.
Hey, dude, what's going on?
How's it going,
hey guys?
brother?
What's happening?
Wow.
How are you guys doing?
Oh, it's good to see you. Everyone thought that there would be like brimstone and smoke. Look, it's a human being.
Hey guys, how's it going? Happy Friday. Yeah, I like a lot of what you guys are saying. I agree with most of it, and I think even like where you guys are disagreeing, it's like your shades of gray. It's all it's very subtle, these things, right? I think only thing I would probably add is a couple points and get your thoughts on it. Is I posted in the Discord is this concept of one saying I heard, and it really sort of resonated with me. It was years ago. Was Brian Chesky, who's the CEO and founder of Airbnb, which is a company that's sort of notorious for having like almost this cultish devotion to this culture, right? As he said, there's no such thing. It's not really bad versus good culture. It's strong versus weak culture. If an organization lacks a culture, that's the problem. No one comes in intentionally trying to be toxic. People are not like, people are not unless you're hiring like sociopaths or something. But it's much more common that you lack that cohesiveness. And I think, Chris, you spoke to when you guys were pulling out Manny's quotes about, well, what is this, high school? It's like he doesn't. That's the biggest indictment, is that he doesn't understand that you need culture. And I think there's this sort of theory that, look, if we win, it'll be better. And I don't think winning creates culture. I think culture creates sustainable winning. And look, can the Padres win as currently constructed? For sure. They won last year. I think it's an environment that's highly volatile. And when things go wrong, they spiral. And so they can win, and they could win next year. But within this current dynamic, they're going to have seasons like this year, in 2021 and 2019. Like, it's not a coincidence that of the 5 seasons Manny's been here, 3 of them have like ended in like just total dishonor. And it's not blaming him, but it's a dynamic that's been put in place. And so they can win next year, but I think it's not so black and white, I guess is what I'm saying, when you look at these things. And I think I understand why people push back and say, well, wait, they won last year. It wasn't a problem. It's like, well, these things are kind of organic. And, I think you could never imagine this type of season happening for the Dodgers, right? Because they don't have those cultural problems.
Not
I
anymore.
did
they
imagine it,
certainly
and then
did.
it didn't happen.
Yeah. I mean, they certainly did. When I was a Dodger fan growing up, they had them all the time. So here's the thing. I think, Tevin, there's some really interesting examples just within our own division of how many different ways there are to go at this. And that there's no one way. Obviously, the Dodgers look like they've got it nailed.
Hey, Craig, did you see the report about the Giants might be having leadership changes?
I'm literally going there.
Sorry.
Yeah,
you had mentioned them earlier without saying it, so yeah.
That's where I'm going. So you've got, obviously, the Dodgers are set up very well. They've got the payroll, and they've got the culture, and they've got the history of winning over the course of the last 15 years. So that's the gold standard right now. But we've been compared negatively to the Giants quite a bit. And I would say the Giants are an example, Tevin, of an all culture, less talent organization. They've got the Farhan Zaidi, Gabe Kapler culture from 1 to 40. But the problem is their top 5 guys on their roster aren't that great. There's no Manny Machado. There's no Xander Bogaerts. There's no Fernando Tatis Jr. There's no Carlos Correa. There's no Aaron Judge, right? There's no Bryce Harper. They've chased stars in the Zaidi era. They've never been able to get them to come. And what's happened is attendance has declined this year at AT&T, Monster, Vulture, whatever the hell they call it now, Park, because the team is boring. They've got a winning record, and they're dull as hell. And Giants fans aren't coming out the way that they used to come out to the ballpark. So, if we look at them as the ultimate, not the ultimate, but as an example of what we could do better in culture, it's not winning, it's culture. Well, their culture before winning, it's 500. It's 500-ish. They had that one good year. They were out in the division series because the Dodgers had more talent. And the Padres have more talent. So, philosophically, I can understand getting big-time talent, as Rafi's talked about, stacking up 4 war hitters, like these types of thinking for building. It just appears to me that we're kind of like, the bed that's too hard, the bed that's too soft, and the bed that's just right here in the NL West, and we're the bed that's too soft, and if they could just tweak it a little bit, we've got the talent that the Giants are begging to have.
I think that's well said. And I one last thing, and then I'll jump off and quit hogging the airwaves.
We do have one more in line with only a few
All right.
minutes. So
I will get off soon. One thing I'll
Bring
leave
it.
you guys with is, you know, I think ultimately this is about Peter Seidler and how, and that's not to say, oh my God, we have a terrible owner. The Padres are doomed forever. He just, I think, you know, he's got to do a better job. I think it's that simple. I think they have a lot to clean up now, but he's the one who empowered Manny. He's the one who was traveling to Denver and looking at clubhouse designs. And he's the one who obviously, it's been reported widely, he's the one who sort of caved to Manny. He's the one who sort of bestowed this power upon him. And so that, to me, I don't know, just I'll leave and get your thoughts on this is, you know, even Preller, and I'm the biggest Preller hater there is, but, you know, if the owner if the owner creates that culture, there's only so much anyone else can do. And even like Melvin, like, you know, I'm having an argument in the Discord right now with Cloud Surfer about it respectfully, but is these problems preceded Melvin. So why would we think getting rid of him, they're gonna, that will solve it? You know, that's I guess my thoughts. So anyway, thank you guys for the time and have a good Friday.
Appreciate you, Tevin. Thank you so
You're
much,
right.
Nate. We've got Padres Masochist lined up, I know, as well, to hop on and to wrap up the show here, Rafe. But I do think that's kind of a decent point to at least nibble upon, that you brought in a 3-time manager of the year. The dynamic isn't such that he's able to just lay down the law. And I think that was very, very starkly revealed in May when he fired his bullet in that Road Twins series, and absolutely nothing happened. The next day, they went out and laid another egg. It was like, okay.
Remember May? We were so naive. We were so young.
Fangraphs was too. We're not the only ones.
I think the problem that I always come back to when there's talk about Bob Melvin is, okay, who else are you going to bring in? The list of people who you could bring in that would be different from Bob Melvin in this situation and hold the same clout is incredibly short. The people who would even be willing to manage a baseball team, like of those guys, is very short. And so I always kind of, it's one of those things where if you want to like point out a problem, pitch a solution. And it's like, you could point to Bob Melvin, but okay, what else are we going to do?
Right.
I think there are very few people who we could bring in. And he's going to be our closer coming in from the bullpen. Hell's Bells is playing. It's Padres Masochist. Can you hear us? Can you see us?
Yes, I can. And I'm afraid I'm a little bit darker than Tevin.
And thank you so much for wearing the glasses. I mean,
these are my blue light glasses. I have to protect
Tevin didn't wear them. That son of a...
Okay, so do you guys remember that photo? This is kind of like in line with what Tevin was saying. Do you remember that photo that came out in the offseason with Peter Seidler and Manny outside of Coors Field? Chumming it up, buddy, and we're going, oh, it's happening. Big extension coming. And a lot of people were going back and forth saying, no, it's probably not that simple. Probably, some more details that have to be worked out. There's more people that are involved. Turns out I don't think that was the case. I think that was, I think it was definitely a matter of Peter and Manny getting together and just saying, hey, I like you, you like me. Let's have a multi-year reunion, and just ride it out into the sunset. And I think we have the hot take. We have the potential to become the Dallas Cowboys of Major League Baseball with a meddling owner, and an owner who gets too attached to his players, as Jerry Jones does. Peter Seidler isn't racist, I don't think, but this sort of thing where he brings in Dak Prescott and he keeps continually investing in Dak Prescott. I feel like Peter's kind of the same way. He has his guys and he really prioritizes getting to know players, getting to know where they come from, sharing hopes and dreams and things like that. And I think it's really bitten us in the butt.
Yeah, no,
that's all I'm going to say. Tevin really could hit on everything. So he's the mayor of Doomerville. I'm just a mere constituent.
Thanks, Masochist.
Great stuff, Masochist. I appreciate it, man. Appreciate everybody who has chimed in today. I know we went a lot longer with the three of us, but it almost kind of felt like a half hour of emergency podcast today to go through this story, to really go through it in detail, to get to the bottom of it, and then to talk about our feelings about it. And, you know, here we are at the end of it. And I really do think this is the last thing I'll say. This is the winter of Seidler. You know, we've talked about winters of Preller before. But if Peter Seidler's response to all this at the end is, "Yeah, cool, let's try again," then our suspicions are confirmed. Then what Masochist just said is pretty much on point. We've got a style, not the same style as Jerry Jones, but we've got a style of Jerry Jones owner in baseball, and that's going to be an issue for us. We're Artie Moreno 2.0. If Seidler shows something, anything, gives us a sense of responsibility, shows us that that this wasn't the perfect world that he dreamed of, then I can really put my target on Preller quite squarely and say, now's where you got to make this move.
Chaim Bloom just got the axe in Boston. I saw some members of our Discord pining for Chaim Bloom. I'd like to remind you that that's going to get us Juan Soto traded for, what was it, Jeter Downs?
I disagree, man. I completely disagree. That was an ownership move. That was
Yeah,
John
but he
Henry
had to
and
do
Fenway
it.
Sports
He
Group.
executed it.
He executed it, but he had a gun behind his head saying that he had to do it. Saying, like, the difference is that if you bring in someone like a Chaim Bloom, you have the pedigree of the Tampa Bay Rays and their PD system and everything.
Yeah,
with
you have the pedigree
resources
of
that
good
Peter
minor
Seidler is-
league teams.
But the Rays don't.
I need
can't
a
spend
big
money,
dick daddy, Rafi. I need somebody to come in, put down the wood.
Okay. I just think that, by the way, the Red Sox are above 500 and they fired their general manager, which I think makes Peter Seidler's inaction look worse, in my opinion.
It does.
It's saying that Boston's saying, you know, whether or not this is fair, I think Chaim Bloom, again, with the gun behind his head, had to train Mookie Betts and et cetera, and had to lead this tear down. But they were still, from an optics perspective, saying missing the playoffs is not acceptable as the Boston Red Sox. And the Padres are 8-9 games under 500, and it's this is fine. This is fine. This is cool.
Well, it's quiet. It's silence. We don't know.
It's quiet.
Yeah, Peter Seidler could be every single day behind the scenes going, you know, AJ, you've got 10 days left. You're screwed. You're done. I mean, you have no idea. But the only thing we've got is an interview in July in Cincinnati. That's the last public comment Peter Seidler's made.
Craig, it's the most important thing you've said on the show. If you look on our YouTube feed, everyone, you'll see Craig calling for Peter Seidler to talk weeks ago, has not done it. It is the most alarming thing about the Padres. Also, you'll see a recap of our winning series against the Los Angeles Dodgers, recently dropped just an hour ago.
And look, I wore this for a reason. Just wanted to. we made this. We made this at Padres Hot Tub at a time when Manny Machado was hitting home runs and looking leaderish and confronting Fernando Tatis in the dugout. And we all make mistakes. Is all I'm saying. Is we all, you know.
And I want to say this to Eric Grupner directly, okay? We at Padres Hot Tub are now live on YouTube. We have a nice live streaming platform. We were so happy we've had so many people join us on there. If you want to live stream the next sage burning that happens at home plate, call us. We will be there. We will be there to document it, and you can interact with the Padres community. So
I'll burn something too. And I got a better GM candidate because if AJ goes, we need somebody, the BDD, and that's Jerry Jones. That's our guy. That's who fixes the Padres.